Okay.
Why am I even wearing a tank top?
Okay, well, hi, everybody.
Never mind.
How's everybody doing today?
Hi. Great.
Good. Good, nice to see everyone. So, how's everyone doing? You stay
Good.
busy?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, cool. So, remind me when, at the end, I need to talk to you about something we're gonna be doing, right near the end, so remind me that, all right? So,
Okay.
you know, we've been talking about positive mental attitude and how it's really important for, especially for long-term goals, to have that positive mental attitude because they take a long time to accomplish usually. Chances are there's going to be a lot of, you know, pitfalls and setbacks and all of these things. And, you know, if you don't have the right kind of attitude, it's hard to persevere or get through those things, right? So when I wrote this leadership program, one of the things I thought about was what I call an analogy, which basically comparing one thing to another. And I like to compare the attainment of a black belt. In other words, all the steps and everything to get a black belt. It's kind of in the same light as climbing a big mountain. Okay, so I think I wrote this better than I can tell you it. So I'm going to read some of it, and we'll talk about some of the other stuff. So it said. So as you approach the mountain, it's difficult, if not impossible, to see the top. You know, years ago, I was out in Colorado, well, a couple times, but when you're way back from those big giant mountain peaks in the Rocky Mountains, you know, you can see the peaks, the top. But as you get closer to it, you can't see the top anymore, right? You might see what looks like a peak, but it's nowhere near the top, right? So, and I think it's the same thing when you're going to achieve a big goal. I mean, you can't see all the problems you're going to encounter, and you can't maybe see the goal clearly yet. You might have an idea about it, but you're too far away from it to really see it and be sharp with it, right? So as you approach the mountain, it's difficult, not impossible, to see the summit, the goal. But as you move with confidence because you have a positive attitude. During your first day of climbing, you encounter a steep area that is filled with loose rock. The footing is difficult and you stumble and fall a few times. Now your knees are scraped, bleeding and sore, but you continue on. As you work towards your black belt, you'll encounter times when you may doubt yourself and your abilities. It takes a positive attitude to continue on your journey. Continuing your quest up the mountain as nightfall falls upon you. So you set up a tent, prepare a campfire, and settle down for the night. Around 2 a.m., you hear some rustling outside your tent. At first, you think it's a small animal, but as you listen, you start to think maybe it's a grizzly bear or a mountain lion. And by the way, they have grizzly bears and mountain lions out in Colorado in those big mountains, right? In the Rockies. On your black belt journey, this can be compared to your first time sparring or your first testing or a tournament experience. It can be just as scary as the first dark night in a tent. Again, here's where positive mental attitude is critical. Are you going to face your fears, focus on your goal, or are you going to retreat to safety? Your strong positive mental attitude will carry you through. Okay? So it is the same thing. You know, you think about that and, you know, how scary it might be if you were up camped in the mountains up there and you didn't, you know, you weren't familiar with it and you heard rustling and you heard noises, you heard an animal out there. You don't know if it's just a small little animal or if it's a big, you know, if it's a mountain lion or a grizzly bear or something that could really hurt you, right? And it's the same thing when you take on new challenges in anything. But we're using the analogy of a black belt. So think about maybe the first time you did a tournament, or the first time you went to spar, or maybe the first time you did a sparring in a tournament, right? So these are all different challenges, and that, you know, sometimes when we have new people that come into karate and they're really nervous and really scared, and you know, they maybe they don't want to come in. You know, sometimes I've had people who moved up from, say, the Little Ninja class to the Karate Kid class, or from the Karate Kid beginners to the Karate Kid intermediates. And they would just, it was different and it was new and it was scary for them, right? And sometimes they would just, they really had a hard time coming in there because they kept focusing on their fears as opposed to focusing on their goal of what they wanted to try to accomplish and all. And the problem with that is that, you know, sometimes people make a pattern, make a habit of always avoiding things they're afraid of, you know, because in life there's going to be a lot of things that are scary, even for adults. You know, I've talked about this in class, you know, women are better with this because women tend to admit it when they're scared, right? But guys, it's like a macho thing. It's like, we don't want to admit it, we're scared. So instead of telling the truth and just saying we're afraid of something, you know what we do? We make excuses up. We start saying, well, I don't think I'm going to do that, and I don't like that, and all these other things. But the real reason is fear, right? So we need to learn to overcome fears in life because you're always going to be facing things that are scary. So we'll go on with our story. So the next day begins, and up the mountain you go. By afternoon, it's raining steadily. You're soaked and cold. Before long, the ground becomes soft and muddy. It seems for every 10 steps up the mountain, you slide back 5 or 6. You become tired and exhausted, and there's a voice inside telling you, it's not worth it. Why not just go back home? As you progress up the belt ranks, there may be times that you feel like you're not making progress. You come to class, try hard, sweat, and work to exhaustion, but you don't seem to be making any progress to getting any better. You know, I've often said, you know, every day you come into class, you feel a little different. And I think you'll agree with that. Some days everything clicks for you, you know, and some days you're actually performing several levels above the actual rank you are. And some days you're actually performing several layers below the rank you are, all right? And that's just how life is. You know, we have some good days, we have bad days. And, you know, what I found is if you pushed on, it made a big difference and you usually succeeded. You know, I remember years back when I was working in the automobile business and I was training and I was teaching with my instructor. I was teaching, you know, classes for him and all. And I remember a lot of nights after getting up really early in the morning and journeying for 3 hours during the day, because it took me an hour and a half each way to get there and back. And a lot of times I'd get back up to Vernon. It was maybe 6:30 at night or 6:45, 7 o'clock. I was really tired, and I'd always stop at the house and you know, get my karate uniform and, you know, stop in for a few minutes. There was so many times that I was like, you know, I just really don't feel like doing it tonight, you know. But, you know, almost all the time, I would force myself to do it anyway. And almost always, you know, once I got there and I started working out and I started training and stuff, you know, I was just happy I did it. And I didn't fall to the temptation of just going home and laying on the couch and relaxing, right? So we need sometimes to push ourselves a little bit beyond what we're used to. Whether you're climbing a mountain or working towards goals in life, there'll be times like this. Setbacks happen. Temporary failures will occur. If you have a negative attitude, you start to ask yourself the wrong questions, as we spoke about the other day. You give in to your fears, your exhaustion, and your doubts. The following day, as you continue your journey higher and higher, you come upon a couple of other hikers who are on their way down the mountain. They tell you that when you get up higher, the terrain gets so steep, you'll probably not be able to go any higher. In life, some people will tell you you can't reach your goals. They'll tell you you're a dreamer, or that maybe they tried the same thing and it didn't work. Here again is where you must rely on your positive attitude to ignore these naysayers and stay with your plan. Just hold strong to your ideals, your goals and dreams, and not let some well-meaning person discourage you. A lot of times people will discourage you, not meaning to hurt you in any way, but they're giving you advice, and that advice many times can hurt you, even though they think they're helping you, right? So again, you're climbing higher and higher up the mountain. You arrive at what you thought was the peak, but instead it was just another plateau. So you're going up, and it looked like it was the peak, but then you get there and it was just another level. While you're a little disappointed, you discover that from that vantage point, from that part of the mountain, you can see the summit, the top, the peak, or your goal. The lower peak could be an attainment of your brown belt. While itself is a victory, it's not your main goal. But now you can clearly see the final path, the steps to reach your black belt. You have reached an important plateau. However, there is much work yet ahead. At this point, you may make your run up the top of the mountain. The weather has become very cold up here, and now it's starting to snow. The higher you go, the heavier the snow is falling. A 30-mile-an-hour wind is blowing. You can barely see. Your face is frozen, but you trudge on. As you get closer to your black belt, the training gets harder. The instructor becomes more demanding. The physical workouts become more difficult. And just like the mountain climber, you need to keep going. You need to believe in yourself, your abilities, and the value of your goal. You know, as you guys progress, you're going to be doing some sparring tests and bag tests, right? And sometimes those bag tests are very, especially after you've done all the sparring and everything, those bag tests could be really grueling. And, you know, part of the reason that we do those things is we want you to know that you could always go a little more. You could always push yourself a little bit beyond what you think you can, right? And one of the things I think that makes you really feel proud and feel good when you attain a goal of a black belt is that you know that you overcame a lot of things that many people have given up on, and that many times you thought you couldn't do it, but you kept going anyway, and you pushed yourself beyond a little bit past what you thought you couldn't do, and you kept going and you kept going, and you came out on the other side as a winner. And I think that really stretches you. It makes you grow. It makes you become a person who looks at challenges as something that I can win. I can do it. I did this thing. It was difficult. It was hard. It was challenging. And I was, at times I felt like giving up, but I didn't. I kept pushing. And it's a good analogy to look at that as compared to any goal in life. So there are times in any accomplishment of every goal that you need to dig down deep into your gut and pull out some determination and courage. Without a very strong positive mental attitude, it's impossible for you to do it. So instead of turning back, you decide to go down to the next level, right? Because, oh, okay, wait, I missed a piece here. Okay, so it's snowing out, it's cold, the wind's blowing. You reach a point where it's so steep you can't climb any higher. So instead of climbing higher, what do? You go sideways, right? You go sideways, and you keep looking for another spot where you can climb higher. And that's kind of like the truth in almost any goal or anything. Sometimes you have to find a different way. You know, we talk about that in class. You know, you're trying something, it's not going for you, it's not working for you. What do? You keep banging your head against the wall, trying the same thing over and over again? No, you keep trying, but you try something different, right? And that's the same concept. Instead of you get to a point on that mountain that it's too steep, it's too high, the rocks are too jagged, you can't go up. So rather than turning around and go home, you go sideways and you start looking for different places and a different path to do it. So finally, here you go. In spite of the snow, the cold wind, and all the setbacks and stumbling blocks, you claw your way to the top. Now you're standing there at the top of your metaphorical mountain with your instructor. He places the black belt around your waist. The feeling is almost euphoric. The satisfaction you're now having, now you feel that you're having fought the fight, endured the test, and have climbed the mountain is indescribable. But without a positive mental attitude, these type of accomplishments can rarely, if ever, be accomplished. So I think the analogy is a good one. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes when we get those feelings inside that we're like, well, you know, I don't know if I could really do this, and the practice is hard, and I can't remember all my forms right, and I have to spend more time doing it. And you know, it's very easy to give up on yourself. And it's very easy sometimes when, you know, you go into class and you feel like you're not really learning new stuff, because maybe you're working on a kata. Now, you guys are beginners. You haven't started your katas yet, but your katas are important. The form is really critical to be right? For you to become a good black belt, you need to have good form. And the katas help us learn that form and help us learn focus and balance and power and so many things that all make up the good foundation of a good karateka to be able to achieve the higher levels. So there are times you're gonna get to that point, and maybe you're gonna start to be discouraged, and you're gonna say, I'm not making progress. I feel like I'm in the same place. I haven't tested in a couple of test periods. I mean, maybe I should just pack it in. And people do that. People do just that. They get to that certain point, and they see some other shiny thing over here somewhere. They see, well, maybe I'm going to go try lacrosse, or I'm going to try, I don't know, something else. And they stop. But in life, there are a lot of people who start and stop so many times. They start, they start in one direction, they get to a certain point, and they stop and they go in another. They say, oh, I want to learn to play the piano. So the parents find a used piano, they rent the piano, they start practicing, they do it for a couple of months, maybe a year, and they get bored with it. They don't want to practice, they don't want to do it anymore. So, they do something else. And then 6 months go by and they say, I want to play the clarinet. And they start, working on the clarinet, and they start practicing that. And after 6-8 months, they say, this is boring. I don't really like the clarinet. I want to try a string instrument. So then they start playing the violin, and they play the violin for a while. And that same pattern. But think about that. What happens is they never master anything. They know a little bit about all of those instruments, but never really get good. Had they stayed with one of them for 4 or 5 years, they'd be pretty good with it. They'd be able to play really well, and they'd have an accomplishment. But in life, a lot of times people jump from one thing to another. Some people jump from one job or one profession, not just a job, but one profession to another. And they never really master it, never master anything. So, I think the lessons that we learn in attaining a black belt are life lessons that we can use really in any part of our life that we want. And I think that you guys have all been loyal to this program. You guys have been this group that's on this call right now on this Zoom thing, or people who have been here all the time. And you're commended for that. So I'm going to shut the recording off now, and I just want to talk to you for a couple of minutes.